What's up, everybody? Welcome to Ask Shane Anything, episode 115, right here on SIFTD Games at SIFTD.net. Coming off the glow of Game Face, episode 400. Hope you guys are enjoying the episode. A lot of you probably still haven't got through the whole thing because it is the longest episode of Game Face ever. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you like all the changes that we've made to the show. More are coming. But I think it was a pretty good first step for 400. This show happens because some of you guys are pledging at $7 or more per month at patreon.com/sifted. Everybody gets to ask questions. Everybody gets to watch the archive. All our patrons, even our YouTube crew, get to watch the show now, which is a new thing. But we do give precedent to those of you who are pledging at that higher tier when we decide which questions to include in the show. So, again, if you like this show, thank the patrons who are pledging at that tier, or if you really like it, head on over to patreon.com/sifted and pledge at that tier to ensure that it keeps happening. We have another great selection of questions, as always, this week. Let's get to it. First up, we have a question from someone I hope continues to ask questions going into the future, and that is Squishy Muffin. Can you fathom what the successor consoles to the Xbox Series X and S names can or should be? It's like there is no good answer, really. Okay, I agree with that. I wouldn't put Xbox Series X and S in the same class as the Wii or the Wii U. As far as like stupid names for video game consoles, there are others that are worse for sure. But I do think that Microsoft made a mistake in not just following the typical nomenclature for its consoles. It should have been Xbox One, Xbox 2, Xbox 3, and on and on and on. Nintendo tries to get cute with the names of its consoles, and it does make a little bit more sense for Nintendo because it's more adventurous with its hardware, and a lot of times its hardware has some sort of a USP, a unique selling proposition. Obviously, the Switch, the ability to switch between console and handheld. The Wii, obviously, with the motion controls and wanting to get people together to play, as in Wii. So Nintendo at least has some kind of a flimsy excuse for the way it names its consoles. Although I will say this, I do think it's just going to go with Switch 2 this time. We'll see. But Microsoft should have followed in PlayStation's footsteps and just called it Xbox 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember, this isn't the first time we've done this with Xbox because, most people I think thought Xbox 360 was going to be called Xbox 2, and it wasn't. It was called Xbox 360. And when that console was starting to get long in the tooth, people were like, okay, is the next one going to be Xbox 720? And of course it wasn't. It was Xbox One. And then they had to put out the One X, and then I guess they took that X and just extrapolated it onto the next generation of I hear you, man. It's convoluted and stupid. Really, like the Xbox One X and the Xbox Series X, when you're going from one console to a new generation, that's just terrible. It's just a terrible idea. So I hear you. As far as where do they go next, Series Z, or in Europe they'll call it Series Z. They could go with like the Y and the Z next, but then what happens after that? Does it loop around to where it's like Series A and Series B? It's idiotic. I hear you, Squishy Muffin. It is really dumb. I just really think nobody has any clue what Microsoft might do. It could actually finally go with like Xbox 2 and then finally fall in line the way it should have been all along. So I hear you, man. It makes no sense at all. And as they keep adding on like these new, it's like Xbox Series X 1 terabyte, Xbox Series X all digital, it just starts to become insane. It really confuses the typical consumer. Look, it's confusing us, and we love video games probably more than we should, and we're still flummoxed by it. Imagine like my mom or like a lot of my brothers and sisters going to buy consoles for their kids. Like they're hitting me up about this stuff. They're like, what is all this crap? So I agree with you. I think the way Xbox has named its consoles all along has been really, really stupid, but it may be one of those cases where it's just like too late to go back. Next up, we have a question from Greg or G. What kind of car do you drive? What kind of car would you like to drive if money wasn't a factor? Do you have a dream car that you realistically might be able to afford in the future? What kind of properties in a car are you looking for? Well, Gregor, if you've been watching Game Face all this time, you have seen my car hundreds of times. My car is in the open for Game Face. Yes, that black 370Z that you see in the open to Game Face is my car. And I'll just be honest with you, like, when I got that car, it kind of was my dream car. Like, I would never spend, no matter how much money I have, I would never spend like $250,000, 500,000, 750, $1 million on a car ever. It doesn't matter how much money I have. I would just look at that money as like, I could help my brother buy a house, or I could put a bunch of underprivileged kids through college. Like, I think about what I could do with that money that would be better for everybody instead of my ego. I have no interest in spending that much. Those cars are so overpriced. Supercars are a ripoff, man. They're just preying on the 1%, the mega rich. So when I got my 370Z, and I'll just tell you right now, that car is 13 years old. When I got my Z, I was working at Viacom. I was a VP, and that was pretty much my dream car. And when I say dream car, it was like, this is the most I'm willing to spend on a sports car. And you can dig up the information. 370Zs are like the cheapest sports car on the planet. Like, they sell for basically the same price as a nice Honda Accord. So that just shows you where I'm at as far as like what I'm looking for in a car. Now, my car right now is 13 years old. And it only has 40,000 miles on it, because when I got it, I was driving to work every day at MTV. That was 2 miles. And once I left MTV, I started working for myself, launched SIFTD, and all the offices for SIFTD have been just as close as those MTV offices were to where I live. And now I mostly just work from home. And so my car just sits there for the most part. Like, I'm spending all kinds of money on insurance, and I hardly ever use it. My wife has a car, and we tend to use her car for just driving around town and getting dinner and silly stuff, because our building, we have tandem parking, meaning that like I park first and then she parks in behind me. So anytime I need to get out, she has to move her car or I move it, and then I move my car out and then we move her car back in. It sucks. So generally we just putt around in her car when we go to get dinner at night or whatever. So my car is really old, but it still looks like brand new, both inside and out. So anyway, the most I would ever spend on a car is what I spent on that 370Z. Now, I will say, while I would never spend a ton of money on a car, well, the other thing too is that they depreciate so much. It's just stupid to spend that much on a car. But in some other universe where Porsches cost $5, my dream car is a Porsche 911 Dakar. It is a 911, but it's made for more than just the street. It's made to go off-road. It's like a rally car. So it's like a Porsche 911 that you don't have to baby, but it also looks badass. And look, I'll just say, growing up, I had posters on my walls of Porsches. So Porsche was my dream car as a kid. My dad built cars. My dad instilled a love of automotive in me, because he was always building cars, restoring cars. He worked like a typical job, and then his last 20 years of his life, he ran his own business rebuilding and restoring cars. So I've always had this passion for vehicles, even though I'm realistic and would never spend a ton of money on them. So if there's one car that I really, really want, and if so let's say you, Gregor, was like, I'll buy it for you, Shane, because I know you don't feel comfortable spending that kind of money on a car. If you were to tell me that, it would be the Porsche 911 Dakar. That car is so badass. So that would be it. But again, you know, the car I have now, I'm totally cool with, man. The good news is it's old, but it still only has 40,000 miles. And the other thing too is I drive it enough that it's not sitting there and getting old. And sometimes if you let cars sit, like the seals start to dry rot and other issues start to pop up. I drive my car enough that that doesn't happen. But yeah, so dream car, Porsche 911 Dakar, but I'm also happy with mine, which is a 370Z. Next up, we have a question, and you knew there was going to be one from him. It's from Kevin. What mouse and keyboard do you use when gaming on your PC? So those of you who follow GameFace, SIFTD, Ask Shane Anything, you know that I just built a brand new PC. Well, it wasn't brand new. I used some parts that I had. Like I used the case and my power supply that I already had, and I think that's about it. The rest I replaced. So you may be wondering, oh, did I get a new mouse and a new keyboard? No, actually. I was perfectly happy with my existing mouse and keyboard when I built my new PC. So I haven't got a new one. However, I will say this. The new PC has shown me all these new things about my mouse and keyboard that I did not know. So just first of all, both my mouse and keyboard are made by Logitech. I will swear by Logitech. I know they were just bought, and that does make me a little nervous that, you know, with new ownership, their products may not be as quality as they have been in the past. That's possible. But I've been doing this a long time, and Logitech has never led me wrong. I've been buying Logitech for like 2 decades, and their products have always been great. So both my mouse and my keyboard are Logitech. I have the Logitech 502 Hero mouse, and I have the Logitech G910 keyboard. And I've had these for years now. The mouse is great. It's wired. It's not wireless. And I know some people may scoff at me for having a wired mouse. But for me, it's just, I don't want to have to fiddle with batteries or taking it on the road and worrying that the batteries die and I got to scramble to find batteries. I don't have any problem with a wired mouse. I know some people do. But I love that mouse. And here's another thing I will say. With my new computer, for the first time in my life, I cranked up the DPI on my mouse. I have tried it so many times through the years, and I'd work with it for like 2 hours and be like, man, my productivity is going way down. I can't afford to do this. I need to go back to my old one. And it's funny, now that I finally switched and got over the hump, I cannot imagine doing things the way I did it before, where I would have to move like my mouse all the way across the mouse pad to get the cursor to move all the way across the screen. Now, I move my mouse like an inch to make the cursor go all the way across the screen. And now that I'm used to it, I love it. But again, until I got this new PC, for whatever reason, I had given up on that. And I tried it again. I'm like, wow, I like this now. But the stuff that I've discovered, now that I have Windows 11 and a new PC, is that this keyboard and this mouse work together. Now, I'm not a big RGB guy. Like my PC, it only has one light in it, and that is for the capture card, and I can't turn it off. Otherwise, I would turn it off. I'm not like this person who wants like these crazy lights and these water coolers in his PC. My PC is a black case and nondescript as possible. In fact, I want people to not even know that it's there. So I don't care about the RGB stuff, but when you connect the mouse and keyboard to Windows 11 or even to Logitech's app, which is bloatware to be fair, they do crazy stuff. It's like, it'll do like waves of color across the keyboard and the mouse is synced with the keyboard. Like, I had no idea that all this stuff was happening. So I fiddled around with that stuff for a couple days. I showed it to my wife. She was like, whoa, that's awesome. And then I ended up selecting like a setting that was probably the most boring and basic of all the ones that they have on there. But getting this new PC has kind of opened my mind to new things, to try new things at least. So now my mouse is like a higher DPI, and I'm glad that I did that. And I messed around a little bit with the RGB stuff. But most of all, I just want reliable products. And the thing I like about this keyboard is that it is basically silent. It doesn't have like I think it's, are they cherry switches? I can't remember what switches there are. And it's the G910. But they're just quiet. Like my gaming keyboard before this one was like clack, 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 and it would drive my wife crazy. It would drive me crazy too, honestly. This keyboard is quiet and smooth as butter. I can type like 100 words a minute on this keyboard. And so I love them both. I love Logitech products. So if anyone asks me ever, like, what mouse or keyboard should I get? I always recommend Logitech because they have never done me wrong. Okay, our last question for this episode comes from Bachby. Hi Shane, congrats on 400 episodes of Game Face. Thank you. Is it just a me issue where there are now suddenly several games I'd like to play after a long dry spell? Or is cannibalization of games actually a problem publishers should look into like movie studios do? Do you think consumers will pick one and then try to get the others on discount? So Bachby's question was really long, and I chopped out a bunch of it. And one thing I shouldn't have chopped out that I did was that he was talking about how he's having problems figuring out whether he wants to pay full price for Star Wars Outlaws or Dragon Age the Veilguard, because they are coming out pretty close to each other, but not that close. They're basically like 2 months separate from each other, roughly. Yeah, it's about 2 months. So to me, that example, I mean, you should be able to finish Star Wars Outlaws way before Dragon Age the Veilguard comes out. But I think the spirit of his question is like, are people willing to do that now? Because this year has really been kind of awful for video game releases. And maybe he's hinting at that people have been trained to not buy games because big ones haven't been coming out. And if that's the case, and they're like, well, I can only afford one, it might be a tough decision for them. And you're right, both are action RPGs, so there may be some crossover between the two audiences. But I think the heart of your question here is, are people now conditioned to a place where they don't buy a lot of games and instead they're going to wait and get them on discount? And I'll be honest, I've been surprised that a lot of you folks on SIFTD are like that you don't buy a lot of games on day one. Now, you watch our shows and you love to watch Matt and I talk about them, but I'm surprised to hear that like a lot of you guys are like, okay, I'm listening to this so that 2 months from now when it's on discount, I'll know to buy it for $40 instead of the $70 or whatever. I was kind of surprised to hear that. So there's a lot of people out there, I think, that are doing this, Bachby. I think a lot of people are a little more cautious about their money. But do I think people are going to do that with these two games? I do not. I think people are going to buy Star Wars Outlaws, and then 2 months later, I think they're going to buy Dragon Age Veilguard at full price. These are big games, and I don't see it as like this horrible stretch of mediocre game releases has convinced people not to buy games. I think it has created pent-up demand for great games. And so what I think you're going to see, and I think you're seeing a little bit right now with Black Myth Wukong, although a lot of that is just China sales, I think there's pent-up demand for big games. And what I think you're going to see instead is that a ton of people buy Star Wars Outlaws and a ton of people buy Dragon Age. So I think the spirit of the question was a good one. I think looking around the landscape, and you're right, comparing it to films, game studios could be a little bit better about that. Because you're right. Coming up here in October and November, it is a deluge of video game releases. I just updated release dates for 4 or 5 more games today from Gamescom that are October, that just got their release dates. October and November are going to be bangers. And so you're right, like it is kind of like, oh wow, like I had nothing to buy, but now I've got all this stuff to buy. But you also have all that money that you haven't spent all year long. So again, I think the spirit of your question is valid, and I think if you look at movie studios, you would say the games industry does a terrible job at putting their stuff out, but the games industry is also fluid, and I think that unknowing of when something's going to absolutely be done plays into a lot of the issues of a bunch of games being bunched up together. And then there's just the practicality of it all. A lot of people have these things called Christmas clubs where they put a little bit of money away with every paycheck wherever they work, and then at the end of the year they take that money out so they can buy holiday gifts. And that's just one of a ton of reasons why a lot of games are generally bunched up towards the end of the year. So I think maybe if we look at this in February of next year, it might be a little bit more relevant, because this has been an anomaly as far as how few game releases have come out in 2024. All right, thanks everybody. Thanks as always to everybody who asked great questions for this show. In fact, please go do that, though I will say there will not be an Ask Shane next Friday because I will be out of here. I will be on the East Coast on a little mini vacation for Labor Day weekend. So I will be gone beginning on Thursday, and I don't get back into LA until like the following Wednesday. And so I will have stuff for you guys. I'm busting my ass to have content ready to run while I'm gone, but Ask Shane Anything is not going to be one of those pieces of content. So I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Gives you plenty of time to ask some questions. Again, go to sifted.net. In the header there's a link at the top of the page. You can click that and go to our forums and ask questions. Let's make sure we got some ready to go for when I come back from my vacation. But otherwise, thanks for your questions today. Again, if you want to support this show or any of our shows, head to patreon.com/sifted. If you can pledge at that $7 or more per month tier, the Ask Shane tier, that would be awesome, and it would guarantee that this show keeps on coming. So thanks everyone, have a great weekend. We'll see you for Game Face this time on Monday.